As you can see, I am not Alexander Fury. I'm certainly not Raf Simons. I know you're very eager to hear from them, and that's why I will keep it very short. My name is Pascal Coles. I am the Managing Director of Flanders DC, and I would like to take the opportunity to present Flanders DC and Flanders DC support to you before I introduce both gentlemen who will be our final keynote. Because Flanders District of Creativity, that's the DC stands for District of Creativity, does more than just organize kick-ass events like fashion talks or Creative Phil or Supernova. Our prime task is to help you, the creative entrepreneur, the creative company, in starting, growing, and innovating your business. Our aim is for you to get return on creativity. Now, we work for all 12 creative sectors, all 12 creative industries, from design to gaming, from advertising to architecture, but of course also for fashion. And our fashion advisors are there for your questions and challenges on the various aspects of running your business. If we don't know the answer, and this happens of course, we have the network to refer you to. If you want more insights in topics like intellectual property, or how to work with influencers, or what certain technologies can mean for your business, please keep an eye on our website, on our entrepreneurial guide or magazine on our website, or subscribe to our labs. And for the more mature companies in fashion amongst you, we have our thematic expert days, where small groups can go into a conversation with Belgian and international experts on, for example, how to develop your organizational structure, how to set up your marketing plan, etc. We also know that for most of you, the world doesn't stop at the borders of Belgium. The fashion industry is a global industry. That's why, besides being present at fairs like White Milan, every year we organize a business development trip to a selected region. We already went to Seoul, to Tokyo, to San Francisco. Next year, we're a little bit closer to home. We will go to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland to find new business opportunities for our fashion companies. Ladies and gentlemen, fashion changes every year, but the fashion industry as a business has been trying to remain the same for decades. This is impossible. Society is changing, the planet is changing, people have different aspirations. The business model of the fashion industry needs to get an update. Designers are getting creative burnouts. E-commerce is killing retailers. We as an industry need to work on sustainability, because if we don't do it ourselves, policymakers will enforce it upon us. And let's embrace technology to improve the way we do fashion. Let's break outside the conservatism that we see in the industry with regards to technology. And luckily, we see more and more designers, labels, and companies who are getting aware of this. They want to innovate, they want to do business in a different way. And that's why we at Flanders DC are putting a lot of effort on sustainability. And you saw Yasmin earlier today with Close the Loop. You heard about how we work on sustainability, and we focus on technology. You had the examples also earlier on today. The past 2 days, we had 24 companies and concepts in fashion technology from all over the world here in Antwerp discussing the future of fashion technology. If you want to join that discussion, please have a look at our Facebook group, Fashion Tech Works. Now, before I introduce to you the final keynotes, one practical message and one more emotional one. The practical one first. If you have a question for Raf Simons, you can ask it via the app. You go to the program and you click on the Raf Simons item, and there you will find a button to ask your question. We will get your questions through via the app. So please use that. And secondly, I would like to pay my enormous gratitude to everyone who made Fashion Talks possible. First and foremost, I have to thank my team. I think I am the smartest boss in this room because I have assembled an exceptional team of people which makes my job the easiest in this room. So, could I ask a round of applause for my team, and especially for Sophie Pay and Nora Wijtjes, who have project managed the whole thing. Also, a very big thank you to our partners Vlaio, the City and Province of Antwerp, the European Commission, Lectra and Redfuse, Online Heroes, Crea Moda, Bernadette and Mac. Really, you have to believe us, without you, we literally would not have been able to do this. Flanders DC does not have enough means to do it on our own. Good. Enough about us, enough about me. Finally, it's time to announce the last speakers of tonight. Alexander Fury is a journalist and a critic, and he works for another magazine and the Financial Times. He has worked for great names like the New York Times and The Independent and Vogue.com. He's also an author, with amongst others his book, Dior Catwalk. And he made the list of the Business of Fashion 500, which really shows his importance to the industry. Alexander will have a conversation with a man who actually doesn't need much of an introduction. Raf Simons has his own label since 1995 and still going strong. Of course, we also know him from his work for Jill Sander, Dior and Calvin Klein, or his collaboration with brands like Adidas. And on a more personal note, Raf Simons grew up in Neerpelt. I have family living in Neerpelt. Neerpelt is not New York nor Paris for that matter. And for me, this makes his career even more impressive. From a small town in Limburg to the big stages across the world, it is a script for a Hollywood movie. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, and I hope you can all pay attention to Alexander Fury, one of our living icons of the Belgian fashion industry, Mr. Raf Simons.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Raf, for joining us.
Thank you.
We don't have very much time, and I have a lot of questions for you, as always, so I'm going to start straight away. My first question is, what do you feel is the role of a fashion designer today, both, I guess, in a business sense, in a practical sense, but also in an ideological sense?
I think that if I have to give a very honest answer, I think the role is to create solely. Unfortunately, I think with the way everything has evolved, we have to be involved with way more things. But I think that the core should be to create beauty, to create desire, to create a landscape for yourself where you can have a dialogue with an audience that can relate to it, that desires that, so it becomes a constant non-physical dialogue, because obviously you don't talk with your audience very much. But So I think that, the second part of the question, maybe this is the more ideology aspect of it. But I think that so many things have evolved over so many years that definitely the period of the designer being isolated in a creative bubble, as how we have seen it, I think, very much in the 20th century, is maybe practically almost non-existing anymore. And I think the digital explosion created a lot of questions for designers to see how to handle all the different aspects. Obviously, there was the sustainability aspect, the marketing aspect. I think, thinking about this night here, I keep thinking about a person that I know is a close friend who graduated, actually showing in this building. His name is Pieter de Potter. He's an incredible creative person. And he said, when he was in this building, showing for the academy, he said, fashion is the new pop. And I think everybody thought like, phew, you're like completely crazy.
Yeah.
And I think it's true. I think it became pop in the general meaning of the word. Literal, because lots of pop music people become fashion designers these days. But also pop in more in the meaning of being popular.
Yeah.
I think that plus minus maybe 95 when I started out, but for sure throughout the 20th century, let's say the 20th century, I think that fashion was way more niche. It was not so much, I don't know, it was, I think for fashion designers, because your question is very much about fashion designer. I think lots of people were maybe not ashamed, but kind of like almost scared to become a fashion designer because it was not by the community seen as an incredible thing. It was only by a small niche audience seen as an incredible thing. But I think lots of parents were fearing their son to become a fashion designer, for example. So I think that says a lot about how things evolved, because so much more people have a word about fashion, have something to say about it, have an interest, which is a positive thing, so I'm not really seeing this as a negative thing. It just changed a lot. I think it's just the environment of people has evolved so massively, you know. I think back in the days, brands were usually smaller format, with some exceptions. And there were a lot of designer-owned brands, where I think over time, throughout the end of the 20th century, we saw a new phenomenon coming in, like the phenomenon creative director, which is in a way not comparable, I think. If you are a brand owner, a brand founder, it feels definitely different. I mean, to me, it feels definitely very different than when I'm a creative director, especially in terms of responsibility.
I remember you once saying to me that you felt like you were kind of it was your responsibility to be kind of a custodian, that you had to look after. This was actually when you were at Dior, that you had to kind of guard this brand and guide this brand, but that you realized that you would be going into it and at some point you would be coming out of it.
Yeah.
Whereas the difference with Raf Simons is that you are Raf Simons.
Yes.
And it is Raf Simons, and you can't kind of extricate yourself, or you wouldn't want to extricate yourself from that.
Yeah. Big brands that work with creative directors are in constant flux. And I think that we see also a phenomenon now that these time periods become shorter. I don't know if we should comment that further, but it's something I wasn't aware of in the early stage when I took Jill. And I think throughout the year I started to realize that these brands, although they can very much support you, and they can very much make possibilities that relate to the actual desire from the designer. These brands will usually exist forever, no matter who's there, because they are extremely, extremely constructed on all the aspects that surround actual core of fashion, which is still what I'm so, what I desire so much. The actual content and the actual emotion and the actual, creating of garments and how that relates to your big or small audience. And I think that most of the big brands, they are very, very, very much now driven by marketing and growth.
Do you think it's important for a designer to be involved in things like marketing, in that kind of, a halo of things around the actual design? Do you think it helps when a designer is involved because they can determine how their work is communicated? Or conversely, do you think it's a hindrance because it can be a distraction from actually designing?
It can be both, I think. I think it's rare that a designer is good in all the aspects that are now, these days, defining fashion, a fashion company, a fashion business. I'm definitely not good in all the aspects. I know that for myself. But then I think what is more important is that the designer knows who to work with, which is also not always your choice, but it's definitely your choice in your own company.
Yeah.
I think it's the core of success. I think knowing which people you can work with, which people you can have, you can make a plan with.
Yeah.
Because it's a plan in a way, like no matter if it's a small plan or a big plan, it's a plan. And I think as a creative director, it's more complicated because most of these companies, they have everything in place. And then you come in and the focus is in the beginning very much obviously about the collections. You bring probably unusually some creatives in. But I have been in places where I had to be involved to bring, for example, merchandising in or commercial, because they hadn't really sorted that out, or at least they hadn't sorted that out for that what I thought was what I needed to create for the brand to make it work.
Yeah.
So, but it's an endless kind of dialogue we can have about that. All I want to say is that I think that the nature of both are very different. And in the big brands, you have so much more possibility, financial very often. In your own brand, very often that's a constant struggle is maybe not the word, although I think for some people struggle. We also had struggles over the 25 years in certain moments. But it's a different thing, it's a different thing.
We're here and we're talking, and you're talking, very openly about your ideas about fashion. But I wonder, as a designer, do you think it's difficult for designers to truly have a voice today, both a literal voice given the demands on your time, and also sometimes in terms of the idea of being properly heard in an industry that is so crowded?
No. I don't feel like that. I don't feel like that for myself, and I don't feel like that for other designers. Maybe one aspect, yes, but not so much only because of the time. Obviously, time is a very complicated thing. It's always, and it was also like that in the 90s when I started out, I think, but now it's in a different way. I think most designers, they desire to communicate through their collections and whatever surrounds the collections, which could be the show or the presentation, the format, like the imagery that you bring out in whatever way. And if that's strong enough, it's enough, I think also. Is that enough to make things work? No, not always, I think. These days, less and less. But it's enough to to fulfill the personal desire from the designer, I think. More complicated in terms of having a literal voice like what we do here right now is that these days you have to be very careful with what you say because you get critiqued very quickly, and it makes, and I speak not only for myself, I speak for close designer friends in different positions. We get very scared to give an opinion where I think we all have very specific opinion. Once we are out there, it's clear that we want to say something, otherwise we wouldn't come out and do what we do. But it's very complicated to speak because you get critiqued on so much aspects so quickly, and I think it makes lots of us pull back in our thing and just try to do it with the things we are doing.
It's kind of connected with that pop thing you were talking about earlier, the idea that, you know, if a designer becomes a kind of a pop figure, a public figure, then immediately when you say anything slightly controversial, there are lots of people listening and kind of wanting to pick up on that, and it becomes a news story. And, you know, and so the easiest thing is for people to kind of pull away and not say anything, or at least not to express an opinion.
Yes. Yes, I got punished sometimes for having a big mouth.
I think kind of connected with that, I wonder, how important is independence for you? And do you feel that that allows you creatively to speak more freely?
Yeah, it's very important. It's something I knew very early on. In the beginning, maybe not in the first 3, 4, 5 years, but right after we had a lot of opportunity to connect. And I think that the different positions I took on as creative director really learned me much more about my own brand than people would maybe think. And I still find very interesting, you know, like both. But it definitely learned me that I want to stay independent with my own brand, no matter what scale is. But then, that said, I also never really had a dream when I started out, some of you in the audience know it, I saw Walter, and I'm very thankful for him being such a promoter of young people. You know, I came from nowhere, and I was welcomed there, and he showed me things, and it was very inspiring. And he is somebody who said, like, you have to do what you believe in, and I did. But at that point, it was such a small little kind of thought in my own head. I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to do this, that I also never really thought about a big company or a big name or a big brand. I just wanted to make clothes, like the few friends that I had here, most of them who showed in this building, Win Walter and some other people here probably who are teaching here. So, and pretty much I never really changed, I have to say. I'm very, very at ease with what my company is about. I think the only thing what I want to fight for is that it is safe for me and safe for the people that work with me on the long run. You know, that there is no struggle, that there is no too much financial struggle. What was the question?
It was how important is independence, and does it enable you to speak freely?
Yeah.
Which you just did.
Well, yeah. If you have your own brand, I think it's really up to you yourself to make the decision to stay independent. Yeah, what I was saying is that then towards the end of the 90s and the early 2000s, we got a lot of proposals, but the different positions in the as creative director learned me how dangerous it can be when you marry in business. I mean, prior to me, John was a big example, you know, because he lost his own brand, because he sold it for the majority.
Yeah.
I think, you know, and that's something I will never forget. I was like, don't touch my breath.
Do you think there's any link between that kind of independent ideology and being Belgian? Because Belgian designers are known for this incredibly kind of idiosyncratic, very singular approach. And I wonder, you know, there's a degree of removal here from traditional fashion capitals, as I found out when I got lost on the train coming here today. But do you think being based here, coming from Belgium, do you think that gives you a different point of view on fashion?
Yeah, I guess that's. I'm brought up that way. Does that mean that that's the only way? No, but I'm definitely brought up that way. I got it spooned in like that. As I said, interning at Walter and staying with Walter for a few years, we kept on doing things together. He brought me to all these places and I saw all that independency, which was incredible to see, but it was for me also the only thing I knew. I did not, when I was in the early stage of my brand or when I was working with Walter and a few years in between, I wasn't aware of LVMH brands and all that kind of stuff and creative director positions. I just saw Anne and Walter and Dirk van Saane and Dirk Bickenbergs and Dries van Noten and Martin Margiela having their own thing. So to me it was very like, that's what I want, and so maybe it was a good thing also at the end. That desire to be, it was very family feeling to me also. All of them individually, I could see very fast how they had for themselves created something very often with people that they related to, Somebody was doing the bookkeeping, somebody was doing production. It was very independent, for sure. And I still think that's the beauty, I see my own company as family.
It's interesting because at that point in time, to say that you weren't aware of things like LVMH brands, I don't think people could say that today. I don't think there's a way you could say you're not aware of, you're operating with this kind of avant-garde level of designers and you're not aware of these big designers. I think now everything is kind of together and you can't be aware of one, not be aware of the other. There isn't even that separation anymore.
No, but also it goes in all directions. It's about press offices, it's about, the stores, the distribution. I think maybe because we were unaware, we also ended up doing the things we did the way we did it, because I still started out, for the young kids here, it might sound strange, but I started out without a computer, with a fax machine on a roll. There was not, there was no access to the global fashion world, except for a TV program maybe, and then months and months and months later, the magazines. The system was different. Nothing was out on the day of the show. The show would be a small, select, specialized audience. They kind of all filled in their own roles maybe, but it sounds like a factory, but like you would have the people who would review it, and then you would have the people who would work with the clothes, create desire again by making incredible photo shoots in incredible magazines with incredible content that would then bring people to the stores into a physical environment experiencing the clothes. So the time frame was 6 months. And now it's just the moment that the show is happening, it's not even after the show, it's like you see the silhouette while it's happening. So I don't know now where that is going to go. When I was at Dior, I felt there was an incredible pressure from the outside on me to be with me while I was designing, while I was in the studio. Press wanted to be there. Press wanted to be in the fittings, and then you do all the previews, speak with all the press, days before you show. I didn't like that at all. And it was mainly because one person was very much at ease with it. So I don't criticize other people from doing it, but because other people do something, it should not become a system for everybody, I think. Yeah. That is maybe this thing that I got from the beginning from here in Antwerp, because it was very independent feeling also, all of them. I think what Walter was doing was completely something else than what Martin was doing, completely something else than what Dries was doing. There was a community, which I still think is important, the community of designers being able to relate to each other one way or another, talk about each other's misery, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But they have to do a good job, you know. They have to create their own world, which is then also going to find all these different audiences that relate to that.
They weren't imitating each other's working processes or ticking boxes, trying to tick each other's boxes or anything like that. It was again about independence, even within that group.
Yeah, I think the Belgian designers, they had also a method that was there was similarity. I remember Dries and Walter and Dirk van Saane sharing the same building, but then they had independent creative language. But then they would also group themselves to show in Paris in a hotel, for example, or go to London together. That's something else. That's not very different to me than when everybody just shows in the same week in London or in the same week in Paris. That's just to make it easy and comfortable for everybody, also the people that surround the design houses.
We've talked a bit there about big business, independence. I wondered, do you think today it's difficult to challenge this, what I feel is a dogma, that a large and a constantly growing company is the only measure of success?
Yeah, it's horrible, I think. Most of the reviews that I read in mainly big established, I don't know, online, whatever, they are always judging it from an economical point of view, and I find that very frustrating for everybody. Now, at the same time, I think over time you also learn to really know what is, to kind of find out for yourself what is it what makes you happy. And so then you can also push that away, but I think it's absolutely no criterion to be judged on when you are a creative a person. I don't think that it has anything to do with the amount of audience you have or the amount of stores you are selling to or how much you are growing your company over the years. I don't think it's right. I think sometimes also I see that it's like really very shitty collections, but then they get praised just because the business is doing extremely well. I think also, you know,
it's this idea that I use this phrase, which I think is actually very interesting. The idea that you tie creative legitimacy to commerce. It's not even saying if something is good or bad, it's saying it needs to be, the only way that it can be legitimate is if it sells a lot, which I think is something that's incredibly damaging, because when designers or anybody in any field, when you're experimenting, it takes a while for people to kind of catch on to that. It takes a while for that to become pop. It can't be pop at the, it has to be avant-garde before it can be absorbed. And I think when people don't want to search for something new and maybe a bit disturbing is the point when we end up with something that's just incredibly dull and boring and marketed and focus grouped into, we know this will sell X number of units. As opposed to, and will this sell X number of units, as opposed to asking, well, is this any good?
Yeah, it's a network, of course, also, and this whole thing is all connected. Like, it took me a while to find out as well. I was like, why do they keep on writing so good about that brand? Of course, they're an advertiser, blah, 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 It's, it's different, I think that maybe the disadvantage of what, there was of course a big advantage to the explosion of how opinion can be shared and opinion can be can travel throughout the world between people, whether if it's professional people or just audience. But then I think there is no more, there doesn't seem to be a filter anymore. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that when things are so related to only the business aspect of a brand, I don't know. It's maybe it's a too complicated dialogue. I don't know. It's. I think for most designers, it's painful.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I would also find it even painful if behind my back they would really hate the clothes, year in, year out, year in, year out, but then they would say like, oh, what a great brand, because it's doing very well. But then on the other hand, I'm also questioning when I read sometimes the reviews, then maybe because they have big business together, they are advertisers, I guess they have to write something, and if the collection is that shitty, you have to write about how good the business is.
Yeah.
No. Do I have to pose a question now?
What? No. I've got more questions. And this is an interesting one, actually, after that one. Do you still feel yourself getting excited by fashion? Do you still feel moved by fashion? Because you've
Every
talked
day.
before about being really kind of emotionally moved, specifically from the first Margiela show you went to. I'm not necessarily saying do you receive the same emotional, lightning bolt that you got back then, but do you still find yourself being moved by it, being stimulated by it, being excited?
Every day. Every day I feel, inspired and emotioned when I just work with my team, or how a close circle of people react to the things we are doing together. If I see somebody in the street, it always hits me. If I see somebody in the street wearing clothes, also other people's work, if I have to be really honest, I think I might become more and more stimulated and emotionally fulfilled, or just feeling happy, thinking about things I know since a long time, weirdly enough, and I don't know if it is because I've been walking this path now for 25 years, so you get to see a lot. Over the years, you always get to see more and more and more, and you know more and more and more, so maybe you're not so naively, quickly overwhelmed anymore as maybe 25 years ago, or even before you started out. So I keep coming back to people like Martin, I keep coming back to people like Helmut Lang, which never changed and it will probably never change. But it's of course also broader than that. We're talking about fashion specifically, it also goes in so much different kind of cultural or creative activities, like art or film or whatever. But I don't know for myself, still not today, I don't know if I find, maybe I find less things new.
Is that specific to fashion, or is it something you find in art as well?
No, at the end of the 80s, when I, started looking, and then, and then during your studies, and then when I started coming to Antwerp, I thought everything was new. I thought Martin was new, Comme des Garçons was new, all the Belgians, I thought it's also new. It's also avant-garde, so extreme, so, whoa, energy, and that I miss a lot. Here and there, but I don't know if it is because I'm too deep into it. But then I wonder, why do I not have that with fashion, but I have that with art? I even have it with movies. I even have it with television series. You can ask my team. Every day I talk about television series. I think there are so much people with bringing out daring TV shows with controversial topics, incredible new way of, building scenarios and like in fashion, I think it's a little like that now.
But I guess also it's because you're within it and you're embedded in it, and maybe there's something in that as well. When you're working within it, it's not going to have that flash of newness. Although I do agree with you, I don't think there is the kind of the newness and the excitement. And that I have a nostalgia, and I go and look at things that used to excite me, and they still excite me in the way that they used to. But I'm not I do find some people that excite me now, but
yeah, of course.
I feel like it's not as much as it was even kind of 10 or 15 years ago.
Please don't ask me names, because
we're
I
not
got punished for that really bad ones. I think that young people should not be so scared anymore to kick ass. I think it's a generational thing, and I miss that very much now. And I have to go back again to something that was happening here in Antwerp when I was young. from those 6 designers that we all know so well, there was one really scared and mad that I came in, and there was another one extremely supporting and promoting that I came in. I think everything's set with that. Designers should not fear new generations. They should promote new generations, because that's what fashion as a global community stimulates and activates and keeps going. And I think it's important. So I like young people to come in and really make the difference. And maybe they're gonna make us look very stupid and old. It's a normal thing. I mean, Martin and Ray, they kicked out Mugler and Gaultier and everybody, you know, they kicked them out. That's a normal thing. And then it makes the older generations fight also. But
it's something that's maybe missing a little bit, I feel. I feel like even when I started, 15 years ago, there were designers who you really felt were in competition with each other.
Yeah.
And they were, not trying to do what anyone else was doing, but they were trying to be more creative than each other, and they were trying to be more challenging and push forward, and they wanted to be the best.
Yeah.
And I feel like now actually what people want to do is sell the most, and it's a different measure of success, is if you're selling more black jackets than the other person is selling.
Yeah, I don't know that, but I feel definitely competitive with some people, and they feel competitive with me, but we're also friends.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you think emotion is essential to fashion, or at least to how you perceive fashion?
Yeah, I think emotion is essential to a lot of things. Yeah, it is for me, it is for sure.
And I wondered, in terms of your work, what emotions are you seeking to express?
I don't know, I think it's a difficult topic to talk about emotion. Usually it's what I can't explain very much, it's just that's so intimate, I think, that whole definition of emotion. I know when something touches, I feel the moment when something touches, it's always usually also showing very clearly, unfortunately. But I can feel also what it means for another person. And I think that's maybe one of my main drives. I can feel, let's say audience in general, people who embrace the brand, follow the brand, discover the brand. I can feel that. And it's probably maybe one of my main drives also, emotion, in that sense. Like when
to
I
make
hear
something that means something
when I hear
to somebody
somebody and they explain what it means, and I always come back to when I was young and I had this incredible desire to connect to a brand. And when I say connect to a brand, I didn't think like I'm going to meet the designer. And that was out of the question, the idea that you would even ever be in the same space with that designer.
Yeah.
But I connected to it. I felt like, I'm part of that world, even if I couldn't buy it. And then when at one point you buy
a t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. And then it really feels like this kind of emotional connection. Like, I don't know, other people call it maybe a gang or something, I don't know. I think you have all these different... It's also something I miss in fashion, or if I have to be honest now these days. I think when I went in the early days to Paris, again, it was Walter taking me. We all know the story. Third show from Martin. And I think the same evening, Walter, if you correct me, or the day after, or the day before, Jean-Paul Gaultier's massive blockbuster show, introduction of Junior Gaultier, Nene Sherry dancing on a chair, all the nuns coming out of the ground. 2 massive, big, different fashion impacts. But they had their own clans.
Yeah.
You would be there queuing for that show, and there was Gaultier clan people. Then you would have Martin clan people, and you would have Anne de Meulemeester clan people. And I don't feel that anymore so much now. I think that changed. You have it maybe in a smaller amount, but I think back in the days people went for a brand. That's my brand. I go for the brand. I stay on that brand forever. And I think right now people embrace lots of brands. Is it bad? Is it good? It's not up to me to judge that. I don't know.
But I think the amazing thing is you have a tribe. There are people that buy yours, and there are people that buy your clothes, and people for whom your clothes mean a hell of a lot.
Yeah, but I think every brand has that. But I don't think that it's for every brand so much the case anymore that the people that follow your brand very dedicated or only wearing your brand. If I have to be really honest, if I would have had the money at the time, nothing would have existed for me to wear except Helmut Lang. The rest was, I could be very interested and inspired, not my brand, Helmut Lang. And if I would have been a woman, Martin. Point. But that's not the case. Now, people can be extremely into Celine, but they will still have a bag from something else, or a shoe maybe, or you know what I mean? It's more, but it's not a bad thing. It's just, all I want to say is very different. It's that's how fashion shifts all the time to a new kind of system is not the word, but although I think that right now everything becomes very systematic, more and more systematic, and in a hardcore way, too much connected to the time schedules that relate purely and only to commerce and economics.
Yeah.
With all the pre-collections and the cruise collections, and I mean, it doesn't count for my brand, but.
My last question before I ask some of the public questions is, and off the back of that, it's an interesting question to ask, do you feel like the clothes you design are anti-fashion, and do you feel like you are fighting that fashion, this fashion system that we have today? And if not fighting it, are you at least, are you trying to question it?
Definitely question it. Maybe fight a little bit, you know. Maybe. Well. Yeah, I think want to stay young in the way of thinking. You know, like I think that I don't want to give in with the brands. I don't want to give in to what I see, what so many brands give into. You know, like they could be so interesting, starting out so interesting, and then at the end commercialized, that it becomes a very flat kind of business-only thing, and they seem to be totally at ease and comfortable with it, and I think it's not in me. I think for my brand, I think I just also want to keep on having that kind of typical emotion that I am constantly seeking for, and that means that sometimes you have to give things from which you know that they won't like it or they won't be ready for it, but at least it's going to create dialogue, or it's going to make them think about what it eventually could be.
Yeah. You're not going to surrender?
Never.
Okay, I'm going to ask some of the public questions now, as long as technology doesn't fail me. Oh, they're very small. Okay. So one question, which is interesting to hear from you because it's not one that I've asked, but you're always very eloquent when we have talked about it, is where and from what do you find inspiration?
Everywhere. I think it's maybe the most difficult question to answer, at the same time the easiest, because it can be anything. I think sometimes the team probably thinks that I'm driving them crazy because it can just be at any time, at any. I'm not the kind of designer that needs to sit on a desk and start thinking how to do, what to do, like let's take this time to be inspired or whatever, or travel to be inspired. It's not in me. It's all the time. It's like I can look at this stupid rock and think, God, I should not forget thinking about it and texting it to my team, because that is what I feel or think. It's at all times, and it is also not connected to a moment in time. You know, it can be a word, it can be it's difficult to explain. It's everything, I think.
How do you, as a designer, think about digital developments in fashion? But the example this person gives, which I think is very interesting, is 3D design to produce prototypes. So it's not kind of about social media or internet or any of that kind of stuff. Are you thinking about kind of digital technologies in terms of being able to produce new things?
We haven't so far, I have to say.
I mean, there was even, I think the last collection was kind of a reaction maybe against that, because there was a lot of the hand stuff.
Like I'm very into the opposite mode of being very present in the atelier with the people who, like make patterns and sew, and we have been constructing the company in the last 2 seasons a little different there to be more, in our way, don't think too extreme, more couture house like more this kind of intimacy between the people who make and the people who think and the people who design and the people who, that it's, we also only do men, so for a long time we did not shape up physically in the company building, like we would work a lot with our suppliers in Italy who would help us out, of course, with their patterns, and then it would come back to us and we would fit it. And now lately I'm changing that again, because that is something I have to say that I find very pleasant working with a house like Dior. It's an incredible experience to see things shaping up when you can do it together with them. So it's pretty far away from the 3D technology kind of thing. I also am not informed enough about the possibilities there, but could be definitely interesting. Except for, of course, we've been doing for more than 10 years runners, which is a very different process of how you design and develop it. So there it's way more, we have way more connection to the technical developments that have been happening in the past decades in that area of the business.
And the last question, because we've run way over, is, and it's connected with that, what do you see, this person asks, how do you see the future of European heritage brands marked by continuity and craftsmanship or by influencers and marketing? I mean, I think we know what your answer is, which is that it's that kind of craft, I guess.
I'm trying to sort out now if I want to answer what my hope is or what I think what the reality is. But